For 5 years, Amara had lived believing that quiet marriages were happy ones. Hers wasn't loud or dramatic, no broken plates, no shouting matches, just steady silence and familiar routines. Kenneth left for work every morning smelling of ambition, and returned every night smelling of exhaustion and faint cologne. She thought it was normal that every couple eventually traded butterflies for duty. But lately, something about his silence felt heavy, not peaceful, but secretive. When he smiled at her, it no longer reached his eyes, and when she spoke, he listened with half his mind somewhere else. She had no proof of betrayal, only the ache of being unseen in her own home. The change began so quietly, she almost blamed herself. Kenneth started using new slang, things like soft life and no stress, baby, words that felt too playful for the husband she knew. His phone, once left carelessly on the sofa, now followed him everywhere, even to the bathroom. One night, when he fell asleep early, she reached for it and saw the screen light up with the name Chioma. Her heart didn't panic, it froze. Chioma was her younger sister, reckless, beautiful, full of noise and perfume. The same sister she had been helping find a job just months ago. Amara convinced herself it was innocent. Maybe Kenneth was helping her with a CV. But deep down, something sour began to form in her chest. Still, she said nothing. She had grown up watching her mother cry over her father's infidelity and swore she would never be that woman who begged. Silence, she believed, was dignity. But as she lay beside Kenneth that night, pretending to sleep, she felt the invisible wall between them rise higher. He turned his back, smiling faintly at whatever dream or memory haunted him, and she wondered if that smile still belonged to her. For the first time, she realized that sometimes betrayal doesn't start with a kiss, it starts with distance. Chioma entered the house like perfume, loud, bright, and hard to ignore. She was everything Amara wasn't, spontaneous, daring, the kind of woman who wore her confidence like a glittering dress. "Sis, your stew is still the best," she would say, hugging Kenneth first before Amara. She came to help with the boutique, but spent most of her time lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone, or laughing at Kenneth's jokes like she was auditioning for his attention. Kenneth, in turn, seemed lighter whenever she was around. He teased her, helped her fix her phone, and once called her Mad Girl in a way that made Amara's skin prickle. The unease grew, but Amara forced herself to believe the best. Blood was blood, after all. Chioma was family. Still, one evening, Amara returned home to find her sister wearing one of Kenneth's shirts. Her excuse was that she spilled juice on hers. The sight pierced something deep. When she mentioned it later, Kenneth laughed it off, saying, "You women overthink everything." But Amara didn't find it funny. That night, she stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror and wondered when she stopped being enough for the man who once called her his piece. Mrs. Udo, their mother, noticed the tension long before either sister admitted it. Over a family dinner, she eyed Chioma and said sharply, "Some visitors forget they are visitors." Chioma laughed it off. Kenneth changed the topic. But Amara's mind stayed there, on that subtle warning, on the heavy silence that followed. That night, as she lay awake, the laughter of her husband and sister echoed faintly from the living room. It was the sound of trust beginning to die. Truth rarely arrives politely. It barges in when the heart least expects it. One Sunday afternoon, Amara was folding laundry when Kenneth's phone, forgotten on the bed, buzzed repeatedly. She hesitated, then picked it up, intending to hand it to him. But a voice note auto-played from WhatsApp, Chioma's voice, giggling. "I miss you already, my naughty driver. Don't forget our plan, okay? Friday night's ours." The phone slipped from Amara's hand. Her knees went weak. The room seemed to spin. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, not because she didn't believe it, but because she had always feared it would come to this. She sat on the bed for several minutes, staring into the quiet, tears refusing to fall. Her mind replayed every small sign she ignored, the shared glances, the secret smiles, the sudden excuses. It all made sense now. Her own sister. The betrayal felt like a wound without blood, deep, invisible, unhealable. When Kenneth returned from the shower, she had already composed herself. She handed him the phone, pretending nothing happened, and said she'd be visiting her mother later that evening. He smiled oblivious and kissed her cheek, the same cheek that burned with humiliation. That night, Amara didn't cry. She didn't confront him. Instead, she sat at her desk and began saving screenshots, voice notes, and timestamps. Each click of her mouse felt like sewing stitches into her broken heart, a quiet, methodical preparation. She knew confrontation would only make her look desperate. But planning? That was power. And Amara was done being powerless. Days later, Kenneth left his laptop open while on a call. Amara, dusting nearby, noticed an open email draft titled Business Travel, Confidential. Her eyes caught the attached flight booking. 2 tickets to Dubai, departure Friday. Hotel reservation under Mr. and Mrs. Kelvin Udo. Her heart tightened, KU, his initials. The woman's was Cien, Chioma Nwoko, her sister's name. The proof was complete, but instead of shaking, Amara smiled faintly. At last, she had clarity. She copied the entire email and forwarded it to herself. Then she called a man she hadn't spoken to in years, Dr. Nathan Osei, her former classmate from university. Now a successful lawyer doctor. Their friendship had ended when she got married, but his voice on the phone still carried warmth. Amara? It's been ages. What's wrong? She paused, then said softly, I need help. I want to protect what's mine, and maybe teach 2 people a lesson they'll never forget. Nathan didn't ask questions. Then you called the right person, he replied. That night, she watched Kenneth sleep, his face peaceful, unaware of a storm forming beside him. She remembered all the times she prayed for his success, all the nights she stayed awake waiting for him. Now she realized she had been building comfort for a man who was planning his escape with her own blood. She closed her laptop, exhaled deeply, and whispered to herself, revenge doesn't need noise. It needs timing. For the next few days, Amara wore her pain like perfume, invisible but powerful. She smiled at Kenneth, cooked his favorite jollof, and even helped Chioma pack for her girls' trip. Every laugh, every gentle gesture was calculated. Kenneth, fooled by her calm, believed the storm had passed. He even told her, you've been glowing lately, unaware that glow came from fury, disguised as peace. Behind the mask, Amara and Nathan worked quietly. A private investigator shadowed Kenneth and Chioma, taking discreet photos of them in hotels and restaurants. Each snapshot was fuel for the fire she was building. Amara drafted anonymous emails, created new accounts, and traced their flight details. Every night, she stared at the evidence folder on her computer titled Friday. Each click reminded her that revenge wasn't always about breaking. Sometimes it was about rebuilding yourself so perfectly that they crumble on their own. By Thursday night, Amara had done something few betrayed women ever do. She forgave herself first. Forgave herself for trusting too much, loving too deeply, and seeing family as safe. The next day, Kenneth would think he was escaping to paradise. But what awaited him was not sand and sunshine. It was exposure, shame, and a calm woman who would show him that silence, when used right, could be louder than thunder. The morning of the flight came with deceptive peace. The house smelled of breakfast and betrayal. Amara woke before dawn, dressed simply, and hummed softly as she prepared yam and egg sauce, the same meal she used to cook on Kenneth's birthday mornings. Her voice was steady, her smile patient, but her eyes had changed. When Chioma came downstairs dragging her small pink suitcase, Amara helped zip it up, even tucking in a pack of biscuits for the road. The kindness stung Chioma's conscience, but greed blinded her better than guilt could. Kenneth entered the kitchen in crisp white linen, smelling of luxury and confidence, thanking Amara absent-mindedly. She handed him his wristwatch and said, "Safe trip, my love." Her voice was calm, almost tender, and that calmness unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. As they left, Amara waved from the doorway like any supportive wife. But inside, her pulse throbbed with quiet fire. She watched their car disappear down the street before exhaling deeply and whispering, "Time." That single word was her declaration of war. Within minutes, her phone vibrated with a message from Nathan. "Everything's ready. The leak goes live in 1 hour." She looked at the clock, 9 a.m. sharp. The investigator had uploaded every photo, every hotel receipt, every timestamp. ready for the world to see. By 9:45, Lagos gossip blogs were ablaze. Headline after headline screamed, "Married man and side chick who look alike, blood or lust." The internet didn't just consume it, it devoured it. At first, Amara stayed off social media. She went to her boutique, greeted her staff, and pretended to work. But customers whispered. Her assistant, Blessing, showed her the viral post on Twitter. Kenneth's face, Chioma's smile, and their names trending side by side. She looked at it once and simply said, "Delete that from your phone." Inside, she felt no joy, only justice. By evening, Kenneth's calls began. He called once, twice, then 10 times. She didn't answer. She turned off her phone, lit a candle by the window, and wrote in her journal, "When the truth walks naked, lies hide themselves." By the next morning, the storm had a name. #SisterScandal. Every major blog and talk show had picked it up. Radio presenters mocked the story with exaggerated voices. Imagine your wife and sister sharing the same husband. Kenneth's company issued a public statement promising investigation, and his co-workers whispered behind his back. He tried to call Chioma, but she had gone into hiding, deleting her social media after hundreds of hateful comments labeled her home destroyer. Meanwhile, Amara sat in her mother's living room, quiet but composed, as the family tried to make sense of the chaos. Mrs. Udo was shaking, clutching her wrapper. "I raise daughters, not enemies," she said, her voice breaking. But Amara said nothing. She only served tea, calm as moonlight in a thunderstorm. By evening, Kenneth finally appeared at the family compound, sweating and frantic. "Amara, please," he began, "this is not what you think." She looked at him with the kind of stillness that makes a man tremble. "Then tell me," she said softly, "what is it, Kenneth? What should I think?" He stammered, offering excuses that melted under her steady gaze. Chioma avoided the confrontation, locking herself in her old room. Their mother wept, calling both of them curses in human form. Amara simply stood, folded her arms, and whispered, "You both did what you wanted. Now live with it." It was the only sentence she spoke all night. When Kenneth left, humiliated and speechless, Amara went back to her car and checked her phone. Nathan had sent a text. "Phase 2 complete. He's trending on every channel. His passport's already under review." Amara smiled faintly, her reflection catching in the car window, the image of a woman transformed. She realized something profound. Revenge didn't always mean destroying someone's body. Sometimes it meant destroying the illusion they hid behind. Kenneth's illusion, the perfect husband, was now in ashes. News traveled faster than repentance. By Monday, the entire Udo family had gathered in the old house in Ibadan. Aunties, uncles, cousins, everyone wanted answers. Chioma arrived first, wearing oversized glasses and a scarf that failed to hide her shame. Kenneth followed an hour later, eyes sunken, face unshaven. Amara entered last, dressed in soft cream lace, radiating the calm of someone who had already forgiven herself. The moment she stepped in, the noise stopped. Mrs. Udo pointed at Chioma and said in a trembling voice, "You slept with your sister's husband? You destroyed your own blood?" The silence that followed was so sharp that even the walls seemed to hold their breath. Chioma fell to her knees crying. "It was a mistake, Mama. I didn't mean to fall for him," she sobbed. Kenneth tried to speak, but Amara raised a hand, not in anger, but dismissal. "Don't say a word," she said softly. "You've said enough with your actions." She didn't cry, didn't scream. Her calmness made them both feel smaller than the room they stood in. Mrs. Udo slapped Chioma twice before collapsing onto the sofa, sobbing into her wrapper. That image, their mother's pain, became the weight neither of them could carry. After the meeting, Amara walked out into the courtyard and looked up at the fading sky. She didn't feel victorious, only hollow. She turned to her mother and whispered, "Mummy, I'll handle this my own way. Don't involve yourself again." That night, as Chioma wept in the next room, Amara was already on the phone with Nathan, finalizing paperwork. "Transfer done?" she asked. "Yes," he said. 60% ownership moved legally to you. He won't see it coming." Amara closed her eyes and smiled faintly. "Good," she said. Let him taste what it feels like to lose something he thought he owned. The following week, Kenneth woke to a nightmare he hadn't expected. His bank account showed restricted access, his business email had been locked, and his boutique's management system denied him entry. He called his accountant in panic only to hear, "Sir, your wife now holds majority ownership. All legal documents are valid." His heart raced. He drove to the boutique, only to find Amara standing outside, wearing sunglasses and calm authority. "Good morning, Kenneth," she said as if greeting a stranger. He stammered, "Amara, what is this?" She smiled faintly. "It's called accountability." Then she walked past him and into the office, her office. Inside, staff members who once worshipped Kenneth now avoided his eyes. Rumors spread that he had been caught sleeping with his wife's sister, and that the wife had taken full control of the company. Kenneth's ego cracked under the weight of shame. He tried calling Chioma, but she had blocked him. Desperate, he texted Amara, "Please, can we talk? This is my life." She read it and replied only one sentence, "You should have thought of that before you destroyed mine." Nathan, who handled all the legal moves, watched quietly from afar, impressed by Amara's composure. That evening, Amara went to the boutique rooftop and looked over the city lights. The wind carried the faint hum of Lagos traffic, the same city that had witnessed her humiliation now bowing to her strength. Nathan called and asked, "Do you feel better?" She sighed. "No, I don't feel anything at all." Then, after a pause, she added, "But I feel free." For the first time in months, she smiled genuinely, not out of victory, but from reclaiming herself. Still, a small part of her heart ached, not for Kenneth, but for the love she buried to become this new woman. Friday came again, the day Kenneth and Chioma had planned to board their flight to Dubai, their so-called paradise of deceit. But instead of warm beaches and champagne, they found themselves surrounded by stern-faced immigration officers. "Mr. Kenneth Udo," one officer called out. "Please come with us." Kenneth frowned, confused, until Chioma's voice trembled beside him. "What's happening?" Moments later, they were escorted into a small room where an official explained their passports had been flagged under suspicion of fraudulent travel. Kenneth's heart sank. His plans, his pride, his freedom, all crumbling at once. Chioma burst into tears, whispering, "Amara did this." Outside the terminal, Amara arrived quietly, dressed in a simple white dress. She walked up to them with calm grace as reporters flashed cameras. "You forgot to pack shame," she said, smiling for the lenses. Kenneth froze, mortified, as the crowd whispered and phones recorded. "Madam, are you confirming this is your husband and sister?" one reporter asked. Amara simply replied, "Was." That single word exploded online within minutes. Kenneth's career ended that day, his reputation shredded by the same silence that once made him underestimate her. As she left the airport, Amara felt the wind blow against her face, soft, cleansing, final. She didn't look back once. Nathan's car waited nearby. He opened the door and said, "It's done." She nodded, eyes focused on the horizon. "Not yet," she whispered. Revenge ends when they realize peace doesn't include them. Behind her, Kenneth's shouting voice faded into the noise of traffic and shame. By nightfall, she had disappeared from their world completely, but her shadow lingered, reminding both traders that calm women aren't weak, they're just collecting evidence. Lagos woke up to Amara's silence and Kenneth's disgrace. The video from the airport, her composed face beside his panic, looped endlessly on every gossip page. People admired her calm. They called her the queen who clapped back without raising a hand. Kenneth's phone wouldn't stop ringing, not with sympathy, but mockery. Clients withdrew contracts, and even his company's HR released a statement confirming his suspension. He paced his flat, smashing glasses, shouting at walls that didn't answer. He had built an image of class and fidelity, and now every street vendor with a smartphone had seen his downfall. Meanwhile, Amara spent the morning watering her plants, sipping hibiscus tea, unbothered by the digital inferno she had unleashed. By noon, television crews camped outside their former home. A bold reporter yelled, "Madam Amara, do you forgive your husband?" She stepped out in a flowing Ankara dress, looked into the camera, and said softly, "Forgiveness is peace, not permission." Then she turned and walked back in. That clip gathered millions of views in hours, making her the face of quiet vengeance. Chioma, on the other hand, couldn't step outside without being recognized. Teenagers mocked her on the street, old women hissed, calling her a Kuna Aniani, the shameless one among us. She hid in a friend's apartment, scrolling through hate comments until her tears dried into numbness. By evening, Kenneth attempted to salvage dignity by posting a long apology on Instagram. He wrote about temptation, misunderstanding, and how no marriage is perfect. The comments shredded him. One read, "You cheated with her sister, not her shadow." Another simply said, "Collect your L with grace." Kenneth deleted the post within an hour, but screenshots had already gone viral. Across town, Amara smiled faintly at the news and whispered, "You wanted attention. Now you have it." It wasn't gloating. It was closure, wearing a quiet smile. Mrs. Udo summoned everyone to the family house the following Sunday. No makeup of civility could hide her fury. She sat in her old cane chair, rosary wrapped around her wrist like a weapon. When Kenneth entered, head bowed, she ignored his greeting. When Chioma knelt to beg, she turned her face away. "Two snakes in one garden," she muttered. The air smelled of palm oil and judgment. Relatives filled the living room, whispering curses, shaking their heads. Amara arrived last, composed as ever, greeting no one except her mother. Her entrance froze the room, the betrayed one walking in without tears, wearing serenity like armor. Mrs. Udo rose, trembling with anger and heartbreak. She pointed at Chioma. "Do you know what you've done? You've dragged my name into gutter water." Chioma wept uncontrollably, grabbing her mother's wrapper. "I swear, Mama, it was love, I didn't plan it." Her mother's hand struck her cheek before the sentence finished. Kenneth tried to defend her, muttering something about forgiveness, but Mrs. Udo snapped. "Forgive? She stole blood from blood. And you, man, leave this house before I pour hot oil on you." Kenneth obeyed, stumbling out, shame following him like shadow. When the noise subsided, Amara placed a gentle hand on her mother's shoulder. "Mummy, don't cry again," she said softly. "This wound isn't ours anymore, it's theirs." Mrs. Udo looked at her daughter, the quiet one who now commanded storms with stillness, and nodded weakly. That night, Amara sat outside under the mango tree, thinking not of revenge, but of endings. She realized every betrayal carries two funerals, one for trust, one for innocence. And she had already buried both. Days turned into restless nights for Kenneth. He stayed alone in a serviced apartment, curtains drawn, bottles scattered across the table. He replayed the airport video until the sound of laughter haunted his sleep. Once a confident executive, he now looked like a man deflated by shame. Each attempt to reach Amara ended in silence, her number blocked, her emails unanswered. When his car was repossessed by the bank, he sank deeper into despair. The friends who used to toast to his success now ghosted his calls. The city that once bowed to him now whispered behind him. One night, he stumbled to Amara's new apartment building, drunk and desperate. Security almost stopped him until she appeared at the gate, dressed in a loose t-shirt, calm as always. "Amara, please," he begged, voice breaking. "I've lost everything. Just talk to me." She studied him for a long moment, then said softly, "Now you know how I felt when I lost myself in this marriage." He fell to his knees, gripping the gate bars, crying. She didn't open it. She simply said, "Healing starts when pain returns home," and walked back inside. Her footsteps echoed like a verdict. After that night, something in Kenneth snapped. He stopped shaving, stopped caring. He haunted bars, muttering her name between sips. Once, a former colleague spotted him sitting by the roadside, staring into space. "Guy, are you okay?" the man asked. Kenneth laughed bitterly. "Okay." She smiled while destroying me, that's power. And as the man walked away, Kenneth whispered to himself, "But I'll rise again. She hasn't seen the end of me." It was the first spark of darkness that would later consume him. While Kenneth drowned in liquor, Chioma drowned in isolation. Her once glamorous Instagram page turned into a battlefield of insults. Brands canceled her contracts, and former friends treated her like a virus. She tried to flee to Abuja for a fresh start, but everywhere she went, whispers followed. One evening, she sat on the floor of a cheap hotel room, scrolling through old photos of herself laughing with Amara. Tears blurred her vision. She typed a long message, "Sister, I'm sorry. I wish I could undo everything," but she never pressed send. Shame was heavier than regret. Weeks later, she called Kenneth, hoping he'd still protect her. He answered coldly, "Don't call me again, Chioma. You ruined me." She froze. The same man who once promised her paradise now spoke like a stranger. Her chest tightened, and she realized too late that she wasn't a lover. She was just the weapon he used to hurt Amara. When she tried to reach their mother, Mrs. Udo refused to speak to her. She became invisible, alive, but socially dead. To numb the pain, Chioma began attending night parties again, pretending to be fine. But her laughter was brittle, her eyes hollow. Rumors swirled that she was pregnant, though she denied it fiercely. Only when morning sickness refused to be silenced did she face the truth. She was carrying Kenneth's child, the ultimate reminder of her betrayal. Standing before the mirror, she touched her belly and whispered, "Maybe this child will be my redemption." But destiny had sharper plans. When Kenneth heard about Chioma's pregnancy, he felt nothing but resentment. "Keep it to yourself," he said flatly. "I don't need another headline." Chioma begged him to at least acknowledge her, but he hung up. Days later, she texted a photo of her ultrasound. He never replied. She wept until her tears turned into anger. In desperation, she tried confronting Amara at her boutique, shouting accusations of witchcraft and sabotage. Customers recorded the scene as Amara stood calmly behind the counter, saying only, "Some storms end by themselves." Guards escorted Chioma out, and within hours the clip hit social media again, the fallen sister gone mad. Humiliation had become her daily bread. Meanwhile, Kenneth's accounts were officially frozen after Amara's legal complaint of financial mismanagement. The fraud investigation he thought was rumor became reality. His lawyer confirmed that Amara now controlled the company and that any attempt to reclaim assets could land him in court. Kenneth smashed his phone against the wall, shouting, "She'll pay for this." But his threats echoed in an empty room. The world had already moved on. Only his bitterness remained to keep him company. That night, Chioma fainted in her apartment and was rushed to the hospital. Amara heard the news but didn't rush there immediately. She prayed silently instead, her heart heavy yet detached. When she finally visited 2 days later, Chioma was awake, eyes swollen. Amara sat beside her bed and said gently, "I didn't destroy you, Chioma. You did that yourself." She stood, adjusted her bag, and added, "But I hope you heal." Then she left. Behind her, Chioma whispered through tears, "You've already won." Amara didn't turn back, because this wasn't about winning anymore. It was about ending. The courtroom smelled of paper, polish, and humiliation. Kenneth sat beside his lawyer, a ghost of the confident man who once swaggered through boardrooms. His suit no longer fit. His eyes carried sleepless nights. When the judge called Amara Udo versus Kenneth Udo, the room fell silent. Amara entered in a tailored ash-gray gown, face calm, hair pinned neatly, her poise unshaken. She didn't glance at Kenneth, not once. Nathan, now acting as her counsel, placed the evidence files on the table, voice notes, flight bookings, transfer records, and the viral footage from the airport. Each exhibit landed like a quiet thunderclap. The judge reviewed them with slow, heavy eyes, occasionally glancing at Kenneth with pity rather than anger. Pity hurt more. When Kenneth tried to speak, his voice cracked, "Your lordship, this is a family matter." The judge adjusted her glasses and replied, "Then you should have kept it in the family before the internet found it." The courtroom erupted in subdued laughter that felt like knives. As Nathan detailed the financial deception, how Kenneth diverted company funds to book the Dubai Getaway, Amara's stillness deepened. She wasn't seeking revenge anymore. She was collecting justice, piece by piece. Her face remained expressionless even when the judge pronounced, "The court grants full ownership of Udo Boutique Group to Mrs. Amara Udo, being the rightful co-founder and majority shareholder." Kenneth's head dropped. The sound of the gavel echoed like a door slamming on his pride. Outside, journalists swarmed, shouting questions. Amara said nothing. Nathan guided her into the waiting car, but before the door closed, she looked back at the courthouse and thought, "He built an empire on my silence. Now my silence has taken it back." That night, Kenneth returned to his empty flat and stared at the mirror for hours. The reflection that looked back was unrecognizable. Eyes hollow, beard unkempt, soul undone. He whispered to himself, "She really finished me." Then he laughed, short and sharp, the sound of a man losing reason. Meanwhile, Amara knelt by her bedside, whispering a prayer, not for him, but for herself. "Lord, help me not to become the bitterness I've defeated." In that moment, her heart began to heal. She didn't realize Kenneth's had just begun to rot. Chioma's hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and tragedy. Machines beeped softly beside her, counting seconds she wished she could erase. 6 months pregnant. She had collapsed after a violent quarrel with Kenneth's new fling, a younger woman who mocked her with the same arrogance Chioma once wore. The fall had cost her everything. The doctor spoke gently, but their words cut deep. "We're sorry. The baby didn't make it." For hours she lay still, staring at the ceiling, numb. Memories flooded in, her first betrayal, her first kiss with Kenneth. Her sisters faced the day everything fell apart. The pieces of her life scattered like broken glass she could never gather again. When Amara arrived the next day, the nurses whispered. Everyone recognized her from the viral story, yet her presence wasn't theatrical, it was solemn. She carried a small bouquet of lilies and a Bible. Chioma turned her face away, ashamed, but Amara sat quietly beside her. Minutes passed before she spoke, voice soft but heavy. "I didn't come to mock you. I came to pray." She held her sister's cold hand, whispering verses of mercy until tears finally slid down Chioma's cheeks. "I lost him," Chioma sobbed. "And the baby too." Amara nodded, eyes moist but steady. "You didn't lose them, Chioma. You lost yourself. Now maybe God will help you find her again." The words landed like grace. For the first time, Chioma cried without pride, each tear washing away a layer of deceit. After leaving the hospital, Amara stood in the parking lot watching the sunset bleed into the horizon. The orange sky looked both like fire and forgiveness. Nathan pulled up to pick her, but she didn't move immediately. "Did she make it?" he asked. "Yes," Amara said quietly, but something in her died before the baby did. They drove off in silence, the city lights flickering like distant judgments. Behind them, Chioma whispered Amara's name in prayer, begging for one more chance at redemption. Fate, however, rarely repeats its kindness. By November, Kenneth's downfall was complete. He had sold his last car, moved into a one-room apartment in Ajij, and begun drinking cheap gin from unlabeled bottles. The man who once signed contracts worth millions now begged old colleagues for short-term loans. Nights blurred into days. His sanity slipped quietly between them. Neighbors heard him talking to himself, pacing the corridor, muttering. She smiled. And everything collapsed. When rain leaked through the ceiling, he didn't fix it. He let it drip, saying it sounded like applause from ghosts. Sometimes he laughed at nothing. Sometimes he cried so loudly the landlady threatened eviction. One afternoon, he wandered into a small church nearby. The choir's hymn pulled him in like memory. He sat in the back pew, head bowed, hands trembling. The pastor preached about repentance, but Kenneth heard only echoes of Amara's voice saying, "Healing starts when pain returns home." He knelt, whispering her name like a prayer and a curse intertwined. When the service ended, the pastor touched his shoulder gently and said, "God can still restore you." Kenneth smiled weakly. "God can, but she won't." Then he walked out into the rain, the water mixing with tears he no longer tried to hide. Weeks later, rumors spread that Kenneth had been seen wandering barefoot along Allen Avenue, muttering. She said nothing, but she destroyed everything. Some pitied him. Others said it was karma in human form. Amara heard of it through Nathan, but didn't comment. Instead, she instructed her staff to deliver food to a nearby orphanage every week, in thanksgiving for closure. Revenge had turned into purpose. Bitterness had given birth to kindness. She didn't know that while she rebuilt, Kenneth's mind was busy gathering the ashes of his ego into something darker. Months later, Lagos forgot the scandal, but Amara didn't forget the lesson. The boutique reopened under a new name, New Dawn Couture, its logo a phoenix rising from flame. On opening day, women filled the shop. Single mothers, widows, quiet wives carrying invisible wounds. Amara employed many of them, insisting every paycheck carried dignity. "We're not just selling clothes," she told her team. "We're restoring confidence." Nathan stood beside her, smiling with admiration that lingered longer than friendship. Rumors hinted they were growing close, but Amara remained guarded. "Peace first," she told him. "Love can wait." He respected that, staying by her side not as a suitor, but as a fortress. Her new apartment overflowed with light and calm. Each morning she prayed by the window, thanking God not for revenge, but for restoration. Letters of appreciation poured in from women who found courage through her story. She became a symbol of silent strength across social media, an influencer without trying to be one. Yet late at night, when the city quieted, she sometimes wondered what forgiveness truly meant. Could she forgive Kenneth completely? Could she ever trust again? Nathan once asked her gently, "Would you take him back if he repented?" She smiled sadly. "No. Some doors don't open twice. They're meant to be walls." Meanwhile, Kenneth's name faded from public memory. He was just another fallen man in a city that forgets quickly. But for Amara, every forgotten pain became a seed for something new. Her heart grew softer, not weaker. When she donated a portion of her profits to build a counseling center for betrayed women, Nathan said, "You're turning scars into service." She replied, "That's the only revenge worth keeping." She didn't see the dark figure parked across the street that evening, a man watching her from the shadows, his eyes glowing with old rage. The day of the boutique relaunch felt like prophecy fulfilled. Cameras flashed, music played, and guests clapped as Amara cut the ribbon. She wore a white gown, symbolizing peace reborn from pain. Reporters crowded around, microphones thrust forward. One asked, "Madam Amara, after everything, what inspired your strength?" She paused, smiled softly, and said, "It wasn't revenge. It was release. You can't hurt a woman who knows her worth." The crowd applauded thunderously. Nathan stood a few steps behind, proud yet quietly protective. He had seen her crawl from heartbreak to power, and now she glowed like the sunrise after storm. As the event ended, Amara stepped outside to the cool evening air. Lagos lights flickered like distant stars, and for once her heart felt completely free. She greeted fans, posed for photos, and thanked God silently for turning her pain into purpose. She didn't notice the dark-tinted car parked opposite the building. Inside, Kenneth sat motionless, watching her every move. His beard was trimmed, his eyes sharp again, not with love, but calculation. In his palm rested a small box. No one could tell whether it held a gift, a ring, or something far more sinister. His lips barely moved as he whispered, "She thinks it's over? She has no idea what's coming." The car engine hummed low as he started it, merging into traffic and disappearing into the night. Amara stood at the doorway, waving at departing guests, unaware of the storm silently circling back toward her. Her story had begun with trust, evolved through betrayal, and ended in rebirth. But destiny rarely ends where peace begins. The wind rustled her dress, carrying a faint scent of danger through the air. Somewhere far behind her, Kenneth's voice echoed to himself, half mad, half determined. If I can't have peace, she won't either. Nobody knows what he'll do next, but everyone senses the story isn't over. Please like, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for watching to the end. Don't forget to come back for the next amazing tale yet.